We got a good result on this dragon in about 4 hours using 2 techniques that will be of interest to painters of all skill levels. The 2 techniques are high-speed stippling using your small and extra small dry brushes, and a true metallic metals technique that uses a base metal, a shade, and an ink. This is Fafnir, arguably the most powerful unit in the entire game of Mythic Battles. So the first question is, why is this dragon wearing head armor? And the answer is because he is Fafnir. According to Norse mythology, he was a dwarf, and not the kind you're thinking of. In Norse mythology, dwarves were partly of the spirit world and were shape changers. But more on that later. Right now we have to decide if we're going to try to use non-metallic metals, NMM techniques on this guy. Hi friends, welcome into my home here at Mark's Minis, where one of the themes of this channel is that I go to painting classes and I share what I learn. And in this video, we're going to cover 2 very interesting techniques that you might find useful. One is high-speed stippling using your dry brush, and also a true metallic metals recipe that uses a base metal, a shade, and an ink. So to do that, we start out with a strong zenithal. If you look at any of my earlier videos, I do this several times. This is basically primed black with the strong dry brushing of white. I also use some acrylic medium to give the white some transparency. That gives me some control so I can build up a nice strong zenithal, hopefully in the direction where the light is supposed to be coming from. And if we can do that, then in theory, we have mapped out the values that we need to do the non-metallic metal technique. So I'm just going to take it on faith that that is true, and we're going to lay down some colors, try to bring up some more yellow in the metal tone. And that looks okay. Will it pass final inspection? I'm not sure, but let's move on. Now, dwarves aren't exactly the Tolkien-esque type of characters you might expect from a Lord of the Rings movie. Research into mythology shows that the dwarves were considered subterranean craftsman types, but they were magical beings that could change their shape when they wanted to. Ultimately, I decided to redo the helmet armor with true metallic metals techniques. But I don't want to get hung up on it now. Time to move on. So for the belly that this loathsome creature slithers around on, I wanted a cold gray. I used Payne's gray, but you can mix up any dark gray and add a little blue. We're just doing base coats here, so it's okay to be a bit messy. It's fine. You just got to make sure you have translucency. So make sure you use plenty of medium, because we want to see our zenithal work below the cold gray here. The takeaway here is if you put work into your zenithal, then don't cover it up, because you'll have just lost the work that you did. So always make sure you put translucent colors on top of your zenithal. Now that we have our translucent base color down, we want to build up what we can already see underneath. We want to enhance our zenithal. So I'm going to do some stipple and blend. Now I happen to be using oil paints for this, but don't freak out. This can easily be done with acrylics as well. Just do one hump at a time and use some acrylic medium to give you time to do some smooth blending. If you're not using oil paints in at least some way, you're missing out. They are just too powerful a weapon to ignore. For this model, I did all the base colors, all the base coats with oil paints, and I set the model aside and for a couple days, and while that was drying, I worked on and finished this guy. Remember, I've got a really good recipe for blazing bright fire. Check it out, there's a link right here. So now I'm just adding some blue to add some variation and some depth of color to our base coat. While oil paints are a dream to work with, you can also do this with acrylics. Use some acrylic medium and some thoughtful glazing to do the same thing. Once we've got an interesting base coat with some depth, then we're going to finish off all the interesting details with acrylics. So by now, our greedy dwarf Fafnir will feel the blight of his bad decisions, and he's going to get a sickly grayish blue skin tone. Now, while it's true the dwarf Fafnir changed his shape into a dragon of his own accord, he was under the influence of cursed treasure. As the evil dwarf Fafnir transforms into a dragon, we notice on the model that there's a lot of detail around his face, so I'm going to apply a strong wash. Now, again, I'm using an oil wash, but you can mix up a strong acrylic wash, and my choice of color was, again, Payne's Gray. I really like the whole blue-gray theme we have going on here with Fafnir, as I imagine him to be hanging out in an icy cave where he can jealously guard his treasure from any foolish adventurers. Now I want to add some visual interest to the rock. Rock and rocks. Well, when the sculptor gives us a large, smooth surface area to work with, get painterly with it. Just practice. Just throw down some paint. Just go where the heart goes and just feel it out. Eventually you'll get something that looks rocky and doesn't look like just boring plastic, and that's what you want. So have no fear, it's just a rock. Now, if I was a real master level painter, I would paint each one of these ridges individually, but that takes time, and we are speed painting here. Got to get this done, so I am here again using an oil wash, although I think a speed paint blue would be just as well in this case. I like speed paints and washes because they get paint into the recesses fast. That leaves me free to pop the highlights a little bit with some dry brushing, and then maybe I'll hit it with a thin glaze later to smooth it out. But that's it. I really don't want to spend any more time on these ridges. They're not the focus of the model. But what is important on this model is the head armor, so we're going to undo our attempt at non-metallic metals, NMM. It looked too much like leather armor to me, so I overcoated it with white and then a thin layer of weapon bronze, and now I am applying strong tone from the Warpaint Fanatic set to enhance the shadows. Notice how I am being picky about where the shade pigment goes. I mop it up if there's too much in one area and spread it around. And I want it to occupy just the shaded areas that we had before. When that's dry, we can then lightly dry brush and slowly build up some highlights using the bronze base color we chose, plus mixed in with that some bright silver. So the true metallic metals technique, TMM, you got to have a base metal color, which for us is the weapon bronze, a shade, which in this case is translucent, you can see the metal underneath, and a highlight, which is the bright silver mixed in with the weapon bronze. The technique is pretty fast and is rather attractive, and I like it for a lot of my game board quality pieces. Once our evil dwarf friend here, Fafnir, got his mitts on the cursed treasure, he loaded his beard up with trinkets and odds and ends of gold. When he transformed into a dragon, a lot of that stuck. So since we have a reddish bronze type of tone going on with the head armor, I thought I could just start dry brushing and building up some of the gold on the trinkets that are still attached to his chin and jaw. At this time, I'd like to go over and hit some pinpoint highlights with the needle brush, using a very bright silver. The Warpaints Fanatics set includes some bright silvers, but the ultimate brightest super bright silver is Winsor Newton ink. The treasure on Fafnir's jaw is sculpted as a jumble. So I thought a few points of bright silver will add sparkle to this tumble of gold and jewelry somehow fixed or pierced through his jaw. Let's hope when the evil Fafnir was transformed, this process was particularly painful. I don't know about you, but I would hate to have to do shading and highlighting inside a creature's mouth. So forgive me if I use speed paints here. I want his tongue to be a different color from the gum, so I'm painting him separately. But speed paints will give you good vibrancy, good saturation, and will still be translucent enough so you get the benefit of your zenithal underneath. It's hard enough to be painting in there, even more difficult to try filming painting in there, so I apologize for the brief lack of focus. Okay, let's paint the tongue with speed paint. Because of the strong zenithal, it should have enough visual interest. I used one of the red speed paints. It doesn't really matter which. You can probably make a better choice on your own. The evil dwarf Fafnir surely deserves a most excruciating transformation into this dragon, so let us extend his gum line up into his face. It seems that is what the sculptor intended, and we see he's spawning some new teeth higher up on his face, which we can hope was delightfully painful for this evil dwarf. So I'm showing the other side doing the same thing because I want to drive home the point that you can use speed paints surgically. You can apply them to small specific areas for special effects. As the evil dwarf Fafnir finished his transformation, we can imagine that he was thinking about where he could hide his treasure. I imagine him finding a secluded mountain cave, cold and icy in winter. So let's base him up with some ice and frost effects on one side and some gravel on the other. Making it even more difficult for reckless adventurers to try to find his treasure. On top of that blue, I put down some ice and frost effects from the Green Stuff World Arctic basing set. Leaving Fafnir here just about done, I thought to add some more visual interest to his large skin area, we would add some veining. Speed paints happen to be great for adding veins. So, give it a try sometime. It's fun and forgiving. Just have your cleanup brushes handy. Yep, speed paints for veining is cool, and they come in all different colors. In a recent class, we learned a high-speed stippling technique, which is fast and easy and a lot of fun. You can see here I laid out the palette for all the interesting blues and grays that I want on my dragon skin. This represents a large area of just plain plastic, and I want to build up some texture. Now, I'm not good enough to build up actual dragon scales on plain plastic, but at least I can give a nice depth of color and make it look like a living creature skin with a lot of depth, even though it's going to be icy blue and cold for the most part. So I've laid out my palette, as you can see, and I'm just going to go to the palette basically as I see fit. It doesn't have to be in any particular order. Use a little bit of water, use a little bit of drying retardant. That buys you more time, and you end up carefully loading, carefully unloading and practice, you will get a high-speed stipple motion. And you can brighten up areas that need brightening. You can darken up areas that need darkening. After I was done applying the veining process, I went over and toned it down a bit where I thought it was too loud. The overall effect is highly controllable. So give it a try sometime. It's a lot of fun. So I'm quite pleased with our end result of Fafnir here. So my big takeaways are: use oil paints. They are too powerful a weapon to ignore. Always give it your best shot with non-metallic metals, and if you can't, go for true metallic metals, which requires 3 different tones. And finally, use your small and extra small dry brushes to do rapid stippling to build up the nice texture you see on the skin tones. The evil Fafnir's days as a dragon would come to an end, though, as he was eventually slain by the hero Sigurd. But that's a story for another time. The photos you saw were fed into Zephyr photogrammetry software so I could render a 3D model from my painted model. After jumping through a bunch more hoops with Blender and the Unity engine, you can get your models into Tabletop Simulator, just like I did here, where we have an awesome model for Mythic Battles, Pantheon, and Ragnarok. If you're interested in any of this technical stuff, please let me know in the comments. Thanks again for being with me on this epic journey through Mythic Battles Ragnarok. Our skills are increasing and we've got more classes planned. For an epic unboxing and preview of all the models we will be painting in the series, check out the video here. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.